depth of trading with both Russia and the EU at the same time. Now, the Russians objected to that because, of course, they had long-standing relationships with Ukraine, very deep economic relationships, but also cultural and
fucking hell, cunt. That was a good punch, actually.
The threat that Ukraine would essentially move into NATO and the West at the expense of cordial relations with Russia. And for all kinds of reasons, the Russians found that profoundly threatening, including to Russia's vital security interests. Now, this tug of war over Ukraine tore the Ukrainian country apart because there were people in the western regions of Ukraine that were very, very European culturally and in their political orientation. There were parts of the eastern parts of Ukraine that were largely Russian-speaking and culturally Russian and were more oriented toward relationships with Russia. And as the people in the western parts of Ukraine urged that Ukraine turn westward, the people in the east felt threatened and they objected. This eventually broke out into an actual civil war. Violence erupted.
You fuck off, dude.
The powers, of course, got involved. The United States on the one hand and Russia on the other hand. And fighting broke out. The Russians intervened covertly. They announced they would be annexing Crimea, which had been part of Russia up until the 1950s, when then Soviet Premier Khrushchev gifted Crimea from the Russian Federation to the Ukrainian Republic within the Soviet Union. And the Russians took it back. And this, of course, collapsed into this years-long war. And the West tried to find a way to end that fighting. And that ultimately resulted in the Minsk Accords, which were an attempt to try to find a settlement inside Ukraine that allowed the regions in Ukraine's east greater autonomy. It provided for the withdrawal of Russian forces, the holding of elections in the east, the guarantees of language rights in the eastern parts of Ukraine. The Russian speakers felt that Ukrainian nationalists were violating their linguistic rights. This was never implemented, largely because the Ukrainian nationalists were concerned that this was ultimately a formula to allow Russia to use the greater weight of the eastern regions within the Ukrainian state to veto any membership of Ukraine in NATO over time. And I think they were right. That was exactly why the Russians found the Minsk Accords appealing, that this is a way of guaranteeing that Ukraine would not join NATO over Russian objections. And that, essentially fell apart as a result. The Ukrainians never were willing to implement it. The Russians were never willing to compromise on their insistence on those terms. And, that played a big role in producing where we are today.
In addition to George Beebe, we do now have Medea Benjamin on the line with us. She's in Havana, Cuba right now. Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Code Pink. Medea, we're speaking to you on in the week when President Biden has asked for $33 billion more for mainly military aid, military weapons to Ukraine. Contrast that with the $22 billion asked for all of the U.S. dealing with COVID.
Are you serious?
That has been summarily rejected by the Republicans and some Democrats, far less than the $33 billion. But I wanted to ask you about that and the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin talking about W&W, weakening Russia and winning, Ukraine winning. And overall, what you think needs to happen right now?
I think it's terrible that the U.S. on all levels, from the White House to Congress, are pushing this as either regime change or a winnable war when we know there is no winning in this. I want to hear them talking about what compromises are they willing to make. I want to hear them saying they're going to put their efforts into negotiations. I want to hear them say they're going to separate humanitarian aid